Alright, welcome back. This is the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. You are listening to Shaggy Dog Philosophy, and today we're going to do something else that's new for me. I have been trying to figure out how to do commentary on how other people talk, because what I really want to do ultimately is not reaction videos, but I want to do current events. So, after spending the first part of my day minding my own business, triggering myself with Twitter, and then my afternoon recording another of these podcasts, which will have aired, probably be the most recent episode to go up after or before this one. And then after I finished that and was uploading the video that will go up tonight now, I saw this. Does evolution really contradict logic? And I thought, that seems like a good way to kill 8 minutes and 50 seconds. And then I clicked into it.
So only with the certainty of the divine revelation of that divine mind can we know anything.
Stop it. Get some help.
This is why, for the...
And I thought, oh, this is probably a cold open. This is probably, like, the second worst argument dude makes, and so we're going to do a joke about that as our cold open. And so I continued, I suspended my disbelief that this might actually be a piece of trash.
For this reason, evolution undermines the laws of logic.
Now, two things happened here. I heard laws of logic, and I thought, well, that's nice and alliterative. So you'd think I would have heard it among any of the philosophy lectures that I've been listening to. Why have I never heard of that? And then this happened. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. The poster of this video, the reactor to the original video, because that must be what's happening, is saying that what I thought is the case, that's a ridiculous and silly thing to say. And then my second thought was, oh, okay, that means that the person of this second video is that kind of smart person, kind of knowledgeable person who, by the clues that I'm picking up from their channel, like the name, might have an engineering degree, and therefore, because they're from a small town, or because they habitually fraternize with very stupid people, they think they're remarkable. And so what they are is mean, and how they engage with people they think don't know as much as they do about reality. And so now I'm skeptical and prepared to be annoyed, but I let the thing continue.
What? No! Evolution doesn't undermine the laws of logic. It's illogical to say that evolution doesn't happen. Like, that shit just doesn't make sense.
There are no...
And I'm like, okay, but you didn't say the laws of logic aren't a thing. So the poster of the video that I clicked in, not the gentleman who he's responding to, is allowing that laws of logic are a thing. And so now I'm like, oh no.
Laws of logic. It's not built into the fabric of the universe. It is merely a man-made construct used merely for survival and procreation.
They're not just used for survival and
Now, I'm going to say original poster is saying things that sound very familiar to me, and which I've talked about in this podcast space when I am talking about being woke and saying things about biology and about social engineering and sexual selection derived from waking out of the dream. And so I notice that I'm listening to the original poster talking about mysticism and just these first three things he said He's talking about mysticism, and he's talking about divine revelation, and he's also talking about things that don't exist. So he's making up a pre-existing worldview that he can then shove at you as though he's a master. And I'm like, oh, wonderful. Okay, so this is a liberal fascist, and I can demonstrate what liberal fascist atheists look like from the original poster. And then I notice Bro's hat says Godless Engineer, and I go, oh no, we're going to watch two atheists talk about magic. Oh no, what stupid thing could this man say? And then he says this.
Procreation. I would say that you can use the descriptions of logic and apply them to situations for, survival and, I guess, procreation.
You can use the descriptions of logic, and my eyes glaze over a little bit immediately after that into the next clause and ending the sentence, and he admits that it isn't about procreation, but you can use it to describe it as though it were procreation. I guess that means something, but wait a minute. You can describe logic?
Logic and all this other stuff they're not designed just so that you can fuck Mary from the bar.
Did you just say designed? Did you say the laws of logic were designed? Am I listening to two very, very, very stupid people replacing God with the word logic? That can't be possible, can it?
It's not the reason that they're designed. There's a bit of a nuance here between the description that we call logic and the absolute truth of reality, or
we are. Oh no! They don't know they're Gnostics. They think Logos is Jesus. And that there's a differentiation between truth and logic. Truth is God in this guy's worldview. He has... Oh no! Oh no! This godless engineer doesn't know that he is a member of the I Am cult. Oh God. Oh no. Oh no. And so this is going to be me making you come through the next 7 minutes and 48 seconds of what is going to be for me absolute psychic torture. These atheists using Christian Gnostic language to argue about God. Okay.
What actually exists in reality. The laws of logic and any other man-made human description, those are our descriptions of what happens in reality. If we don't understand...
Man-made, did he just say that man-made descriptions are descriptions of what we see in reality?
Understand what happens in reality, our descriptions of it can be wrong. We have methods and...
If we don't understand reality, our descriptions of it can be wrong. So, if you're not coming to this from my 5-part manic episode about intellect and consciousness, if you're not coming to that, go watch it. But if you are coming to this from that, you will know that words like understanding and intellect, these are banned words in at least this space because the people using them don't know what they're saying. This guy's one of those kind of people.
Processes to try to bridge that gap so that we get the best representation of that reality.
Because there's no other transcendent truth. There's nothing higher than the material. And if you are, again, a theistic evolutionist, then it almost implies that you can ascend through a process of evolution.
What he's describing is correct. What he's describing, arguing against actually what OP believe, not what OP, but what, let's call him Poster 2. The man I'm looking at is OP. The man I'm responding to is Poster 2. And what he's saying is that there's no higher reality than the material. That logic is not a descriptor with abstract terms of an abstract unreality that we can't interact with. That's what Poster 2 is saying. He's saying that logic is how we describe the world of forms. He doesn't have the world of forms, and he doesn't have Plato, and he doesn't have the light. But what he's saying is the 19th century I am worldview, that by describing something out loud and thinking that you understand it, or at least coming to a conclusion about it in the Thomas Hobbes Leviathan sort of way, you're taking an active participatory role in godhood. And what this guy is saying is that there is no godhood, that there is no world of forms, that logic does not and is not playing any part in our evolutionary process, and that through logic and through word games and through the mental manipulation of the people around us by our words, we are not, in fact, ascending to a higher plane of reality. And he's factually right. He's actually countering the very, very, very toxic I am movement and the esoteric tradition, the very harmful cult aspects. He's actually entirely right.
Into a state of divinity, right? Because if we came from the swamp to the land creatures to the chimpanzees.
Wait a minute. How is the Godless Engineer so Gnostic? And how is it that this guy is saying that there is no divinity that manifests itself in an observable and material, through an observable and material process that is describable and is repeatable, which is fact. If we knew the method by which God, as it's described by the Christians as an acting and capricious God, as the way it's described in the Judeo-Christian tradition, as walking on the earth and hardening people's hearts, if we knew how it was doing that, we would be able to replicate it, and thus we would be able to do it, and we wouldn't need to eat of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil in order to ascend to godhood, in order to be like God. So why? I am very confused at this point. This is all I know about this channel. It's as much as I've ever engaged with this guy's work, and I am very confused about who he is. Is he godless? Is he an atheist? Is he actually how he presents himself? Or is this somehow irony? Because if he's from North Carolina, especially if he's from the western part of North Carolina, his liberalism would present as, it would present outwardly as truthful and faithful conservatism. And on the inside, it's sneering and ugly irony. So that might be what he's doing. But I do notice that all of his reaction gifts are all sneering and ugly irony. So is he being sneering and ugly in his irony when Bro says that there's no observable God? Is that
to a process of evolution into a...
Because I'm telling you, and if you've been listening to my work leading up to this, I'm telling you, I'm talking and I'm describing to you a cult, and several cults, hundreds, maybe thousands of cults, 200 years of cults that thought they could pilot human engineering. And so not human engineering, human evolution, that believed they could direct and pilot human evolution. And now an engineer, what do engineers believe? They think they can structure and control everything. So is this guy a godless engineer because he's a transhumanist who believes that he can engineer the perfect human being?
State of divinity, right? Because if we came from the swamp to the land creatures to the chimpanzee family to the upright man, evolution's not done. After man, you have the Superman or Ubermensch.
I'm fast as fuck, boy. Still fast as fuck, boy. Come get some.
Oh man, this show is giving me psychic whiplash. I can't tell because of how this has been edited and where it's being presented, because there's no narration guiding me through this like a narrative. It's just presenting these two arguments, and I don't really know who is who. I assume that presenter 2 is the channel because of the engineering, etc. But OP, presenter 1, is talking about Nietzschean, i.e. 19th century thought vis-a-vis human evolution. Nietzsche was not the only person who believed that the nobility, the white elite European nobility, were going to spawn a superhuman, a human that was bigger, stronger, faster, and significantly more intelligent. And the reason they believed that is because they had been studiously reading their Bible for 1700 years. And when they come across in Genesis where it says, and in those days there were giants, etc., they went, wait a minute. And the answer that came out of people like Helena Blavatsky was that in the olden times, the people that we think of as heroes and gods, the things that we think of as angels and demons, were once, in the case of heroes and gods, physically embodied superhumans. And we'll get to what superhumans means in a second. And in the latter case of angels and demons, never embodied human, superhuman souls. And so what they believe, because the books of Enoch never went away. If you believe what I was taught about the Rosicrucians, and I'm beginning to wonder whether it wasn't pro-Freemason, and that by that I mean pro-Scottish Rite Freemason propaganda, I was taught that the Rosicrucians as a practicing people never actually existed. I was taught that the Rosicrucians as a practicing secret society never existed, and that the books and the literature and the claims to being Rosicrucian all happened anonymously as anti-government works, and then many centuries later as countercultural revolutions within the secret society system. And what seems to actually be true is that the way that counter-Catholic Christianity presented itself was as Rosicrucianism, in the way they told each other what books to read to help one another know the ancient secrets as far as Gnostic secrets go. They were publishing books like the Chemical Wedding of Rosenkreutz, I believe is what it's called. I've read it, and it's nonsense. You have to know exactly what everything means to take any meaning out of it. And what that means is it was only published for like 10 or 15 people. It wasn't published for a mass audience because there aren't mass symbols in it. And you can know that you can double check this. You can know that I'm right because you can read people like Blavatsky, and then you can read her cult, and you can notice that her work is extremely dense and unapproachable, and then the writings that come after her and her cult are much simpler and much more approachable. And so this guy just said that we all know and we all assume that we're going to evolve out of the human state into the superhuman state, into the next state. So poster 1 is at least transhumanist if the way he's being presented is authentic to his interests. And then poster number 2, the Godless Engineer, I just said in the immediate frame that everything that he said and every way that he's presented himself is as transhumanist. And as I keep saying, the only people that actually fight among themselves are people that are very close to one another. So is this what transhumanism looks like in the modern era? Is this actually what transhumanism looks like in the modern era? Are you just arguing with one another using quasi-Christian language and quasi-philosophical language with understanding neither of philosophy nor ancient Greek language? Do you not know what the words you're using mean? When you say the word logic, you understand that that comes from logos, right? And that the log in that is logos, and the ik is it's a suffix meaning having to do with the logos, right? So logic is having to do with the logos, and logos is a word which means word. And so it means the spoken or the written word. So any logical argument, people, any logical argument is literally any argument made either with your mouth or on some written surface using words. It's so simple it hurts me that you think there are laws for this. So now I'm angry, so let's see if maybe at least I can be funny and make fun of these dickheads. They make people like me look like an impenetrable dickhead. When if anything, I'm a gaping asshole. Let's get this right.
Think you have any idea how fast I really am? I'm fast as fuck, boy.
Hyperman, demigods, and ye shall be as gods. Oh, gee, where have we heard that?
That's what I was predicting. So now is he debunking what he's saying?
Lie of the serpent.
Via the serpent. That's just outright Gnostic. And so now he's annoyed because he's using the Gnostic language that he wants. Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah, I agree, Arduin. No amount of booze can fix this kind of fucked up. Evolution does not entail us evolving to Superman divinity status. That's not how evolution works at all. We're never going to be able to do that. Superman is a godlike figure, but also he was crafted to be that way just because of that's how he was crafted.
And while we're talking about it, early 19th century Judaism, Superman as we have him today is a product of the desires for Jewish people to be liberated out of the program and the ghettos and second-class citizenship and literal demonization by the press and in art. So, I mean, Superman's kind of a sad character. Kind of tragic.
Right, that's how he was designed. But,
you know, to the point. That's how he was designed. He was designed to be tragic because wasn't his planet blown up or something?
That's not what evolution entails. We're always going to be evolving, but all that means is that we're going to continue to adapt to our environment. That's all that really evolution is. It's the adaptation to the environment that you're in. And it's the change in allele frequencies and how those new changes or whatnot allow you to survive better in the environment. It's all about how life changes to survive in the environment. That's what evolution is.
I don't know what the fuck you just said.
Again, Dr. Monson says,
I could say the same. You did not talk about evolution in an interesting, or you reduced it to even a reductive argument. Sure, evolution is the changes in the environment. Sure, the adaptations in the environment. Sure. But you also acknowledged in your earlier argument that it's sexual selection and that the logic, the mystical, magical logic that both of you are bandying around can be used.
It very, very well. In the ancient tradition, the Greek tradition, some of the other traditions before that, there was this belief of this chain of being that ascended upward between the physical, and after you transcend the physical, you go into the ethereal or the spiritual.
This is not true, in fact. This is made up in the 16 and 1700s by Rosicrucians and Freemasons and former Knights Templar.
No.
But that's not the way it is biblical. There's the spiritual world, and then there is the physical world. There's nothing.
Also, not entirely true, because, I mean, even just think about the Oceans song. They're a metal band called The Firmament. There's the water, there's the spirit over the water, there's also the firmament encasing all of that, and then there's also the starry plane, and then there's so much more than what he's trying to imply. There's also the land, and then there's the water under the land, and he doesn't really understand what he's saying. Doesn't understand what he's saying at all.
Assumes that we can transcend into the spirit world in and of ourselves.
No, don't like that.
That's also not true. The only person to ever do that was Ezekiel. I think there may have been one other person.
So what he's basically...
Enoch. That's how Enoch was able to get the books of Enoch. So not the guy on the screen, but poster 1, OP, is of the opinion that the book of Enoch or Enoch, however you want to pronounce it. I'm going to say Enoch because I like that. But the book of Enoch, he's assuming that that's history. And he's assuming that that's actually how everybody thought about everything. And that book, the reason it's not included in any faith but the Ethiopian is because that's not true. It's also not true that it's only included in the Ethiopic. But the point is, that's not how everybody thought. The people that believed the way that these gentlemen believe and the way they're arguing about this book, the people that believed that way were hunted down and brutally murdered.
He's saying here is that he's coming from a Christian perspective of reality. And so if it doesn't...
Not a Christian perspective at all. A Gnostic quasi-Christian perspective.
...match what the Bible says, then that means that it's not real. While I disagree with the whole transcending into the spiritual realm or the ether or something like that, because the ether doesn't exist. Spiritual realm, for all intents and purposes, we can't know and we don't know whether or not it exists. But for the time being, since we don't have any evidence that it does exist, then we don't need to say that it definitely does. While I disagree with the whole transcending into the spiritual realm or the ether or something like that, because the ether doesn't exist. Spiritual realm, for all intents and purposes, we can't know and we don't know whether or not it exists. But for the time being, since we don't have any evidence that it does exist, then we don't need to say that it definitely does.
We actually have evidence that it doesn't exist. We disproved that theory with our first space travel.
Neither of those things are viable explanations at this particular point. But
they thought space was going to be a milky, kind of soupy space.
He's showing here is that he's coming at this from a biblical perspective. If it doesn't match the Bible, then it is wrong.
Because they understood that there were waters above the waters that are above the firmament that separated the mist from the waters above the firmament. So the ancient people, when you describe the firmament, you're actually describing material reality, but you're describing it in dream language, because that's how they experienced it. Was in a close enough state, an altered state of consciousness, but a dream state, because we don't use the word consciousness around here if we can avoid it. And so, because of bad translations in the 12 and 1300s of the Bible, they understood the ether, they understood the waters above the firmament to be actual waters. So if you read, there's a book about Alexander the Great where he goes on fantastic adventures. One of the adventures he goes on a boat ride to the moon. So he sails through the waters of space between Earth and the moon. We literally believed and I know that was a long time before the Middle Ages, but that's where they got the idea, is that book didn't go anywhere. That book stuck around for a long time. So that you haven't heard about it is on purpose. And I felt very betrayed when I learned about it, because it was fucking awesome. Alexander goes on the adventure in Final Fantasy. I think it's Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy IV. It's amazing. Anyway, yeah. What were these jokers talking about? Let's get back to something uninteresting.
don't know whether or not it exists. But for the time being, since we don't have...
We do know it doesn't exist. It's not a milky soup between... That's what I was trying to say. There's no sea between Earth and the moon and Mars, etc. You can't get in a boat and ride there on the solar winds, because they understood the mathematics of the solar winds, and they understood what was happening, because our planet has evidently... I'm unclear as to what degree. Like, I saw a guy try to say that the Grand Canyon was carved by an electrical discharge from the stratosphere or the atmosphere or whatever, what do they call it? They call it like near space, because of a solar wind discharge from the sun. But the solar wind is very real, and the dream state ancient peoples understood the mathematics of the solar wind coming off the sun, but then the medieval people of the 12 and 1300s completely misunderstood, because it was described as in dream logic. It was described in dream logic. Here we are arguing about logic, and what these guys don't understand is that the things that they're arguing about are dream logic. And so you have to interpret them into material, the physical world. You have to interpret them into what you're seeing. And that was the process of the 20th century science that evidently both of them missed out on.
Evidence that it does exist, then we don't need to say that it definitely does.
It doesn't exist. And I just need to keep saying that, because I'm allowing him to say that. I'm not going to... I don't know how well I'm going to edit this, but anyway, probably not at all. I need to keep reminding you that it doesn't exist, because it has been observed, proved that there is no water, no ether between Earth and the moon. That he thinks it might not have been proved makes me worry why he calls himself an engineer.
Neither of those things are viable explanations at this particular point. But what he's showing here is that he's coming at this from a biblical perspective. If it doesn't match the Bible, then it is wrong. The Bible
That is dangerous. Don't do that.
Is the bar for determining what is real and what is not for him. That is scary.
It's not scary. It's just dangerous.
So yeah, there's that chain of being, from the lower animals to...
Actually, it's not even dangerous. It's not even dangerous. It's useless as a navigation tool toward getting to the truth. So if you're trying to get to the moon, believing that there's wind that's going to carry you there is never going to get you to escape velocity. That worldview, it's not dangerous. It's not scary. I mean, it is both of those things if you're dumb. But what it is, it's just useless for the true seeker. The true lover of truth. It's just not a viable means of knowing the truth.
So yeah, there's that chain of being, from the lower animals to humans to the angels to God. Oh my God! Wow! But it assumes...
There's a way that you could pull an Obi-Wan Kenobi and argue that there, from a certain perspective, there is a chain of being from humans to angels to God, from animals to humans to angels to God. But that doesn't mean it's useful.
But it assumes that it's this ladder-like structure. This is purely philosophical. You can believe it if you want to, but that's...
It's actually not purely philosophical. It's purely metaphysical.
Not science. And a lot of the evolution, the idea that fish become philosophers, that frogs turn into princes.
That's called the transmigration of the soul.
Given enough time and chance and, evolution. See, frogs become princes. That's literally what happens. And, that's why evolution only starts out with long ago and far away. Because
now, wait a minute. We shouldn't just laugh at that. This is no longer a reaction video. I haven't seen poster 2 in too long, in my opinion, for this to continue to be fair use and not just to be bullying. But that's a question people have. Because, see, science, like Christianity, doesn't do a good enough, it does not do anywhere approaching an adequate job of showing how the mystery is still happening around us. So my mother taught me that evolution was probably bunk, because when was the last time you saw a monkey born that was a human? And the question is a good one. The question's a good one. And so when he says, whenever they want to talk about evolution, they always want to talk about a long time ago and far away. If you notice the new conversations about life and how life happened on this planet have begun because there's no explanation for how there could have been enough energy, because we haven't been able, and the amounts of energy that we have been able to create, and we are able to create the amounts of, well, there are people who claim to be able to create the amounts of energy that are being made in our sun. We're able to make the amounts of energy we're able to make enormous amounts of energy is what I'm trying to say, but we're not able to make anywhere near the amounts of energy that are made at the explosions or even at the deaths of stars. I said that backward, but whatever. And so what they're doing is they're increasingly reaching, they're now reaching extraterrestrially. They're no longer looking at the planet and saying, okay, they're looking at the planet and they're saying, even at the most molten moment of the planet's surface and at the most bioreactive chemical stages of our oceans, there wasn't enough energy to produce life. And so people are starting to look extraterrestrially. And if you look at what they're finding, and this is what I say when I say that science isn't doing a good job of showing the mystery, and that they have to reach increasingly long ago to explain how life is even possible. They're actually looking now at comets, and they're finding the basic building blocks of amino acids. They found amino acids on comets. And so now the only thing that one can extrapolate out from that is that means that there were amino acids almost as soon as there were complex molecules, almost as soon as there were gases and molecules more complex than hydrogen and oxygen. Frankly, there was already the proteins necessary for life. And so what that means is that when the Gnostic tradition to which he is pointing and the Aryan Christian tradition from which he has aimed himself says that Jesus is not co-eternal with God, that there was the Big Bang, and then almost immediately after the Big Bang, in the same time span of God, but before the formation of the first lowercase g gods, which means the formation of the first stars, there was life. And if you even look at the modern evolution science is pointing in that very direction.
They're getting ready to give you their fairy tale.
I can't think of one evolutionary scientist.
He did at least show up at the end of that diatribe. I don't even know what that's a mean word, but he did at least show up after I pointed out that it had been a while.
I can't think of one evolutionary scientist or one person that accepts evolution for the fact that it is, that would start out talking to somebody about evolution by saying,
A long time ago, and very, very far away, a prince turned into a frog, and then back into a prince, and then fish turned into a philosopher. So what?
We know that this is straw man, right? Everybody that's watching him is watching him be a performative straw man. Like he's arguing with a straw man, right?
One day, a fish got up, walked around, called itself Confucius. And
this is not what OP said.
None of what he said is actually evolution or represents evolutionary theory or anything like that. Frogs don't turn into princes.
No, maybe not. But some of what he was talking about is mystically appropriate to what Charles Darwin and his own mystical experience noticed.
Would violate the law of monophyly, which, in case you guys don't know, the law of monophyly says once an organism is part of a clade, it is always going to be part of that clade. A frog is not part of the clade that Homo sapiens are in. So there's no way that frog can turn into a prince unless you crown a frog a prince.
or unless those frogs turned into mammals during the extinction event that wiped out all of the massive animals that ruled the planet some million years ago. Because we now think that the mammalian, whatever he just said, actually came out of the reptiles, and we know that reptiles came out of fish, so why can't it be that way? Why can't it be what Guy said, and Guy just used a metaphor because he's speaking in language that we all understand about a thing that happened that, frankly, if we all understand it in the same way, why is metaphorical or euphemistic language that's clearer and more quickly to the point not useful? And anyway, when are we going to talk about the logic of evolution?
But evolution, if it really is just a matter of survival.
I don't know if you guys heard, but Casey said some philosophers are fishy, though.
I mean, I think that's a good joke. Philosophers are pretty fishy.
Materialism, if evolution is true, if evolution's true, then it's the whole brain and the human mind are made purely for survival and procreation, and the laws of logic are mere conventions that have nothing absolutely binding to make them give you any form of transcendent truth.
Plato agreed. That's what Platonism is using logic to reach toward a greater truth, because he noticed what is true is that what sets us apart from the animals is our ability and our mastery of complex language and the abstract and concrete usage of the logos, of the word. So you can write down the word, and you can carve it into stone, and it can remain the word, and it can retain its meaning for as long as that stone can survive. And if you get the right kind of stone, ask the Egyptians, they know better than I do, you get the right kind of stone and it can last hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years. A lot of these, the late Bronze Age cults that were building these giant megalithic buildings were building them, intending them to survive all of time. They were intending them to survive the death, not just the death of the material, the life of the on the continent, but the actual death and destruction of the continents as the seas rearranged themselves. Because again, these people had the same ability to look at the environments they lived in and extrapolate out what happened to them. They had the same imaginations we do. And so very much Plato's religion, Platonism is and his world of forms and his light and his source are very much about what he says is impossible here.
The whole brain and the human mind are made purely for survival and procreation, and the laws of logic are mere conventions that have nothing absolutely binding to make them give you any form of transcendent truth, which has always been the goal of all philosophers.
Sort of. It is factual. Look at his body. Not even body shaming him. Look at his body. He can't fight a bear. So it is true that as far as physical species, as material species go, humans are extremely ill-equipped to survive in their environment. So when you tell a person like him, or you tell a person like even like Charles Darwin, or you tell a person like the people that Socrates is dialoguing with in Plato's mind, that we evolved to what we are because we were able to survive in our environments and continue procreating, and that our ability to communicate at the levels of abstraction and the skill that we do is actually tied to that and not tied to cult behavior. That cult behavior is entirely unnecessary, which is what both of these guys in some way want to argue, that you don't need to be religious in order to find the truth. Plato's saying, look, the word is conventional. It's how we use it. There's a greater word above that, but you can only experience it through the word and the human life.
Past, present, that they were pursuing some sort of a truth that can be found through philosophy.
I mean, I would agree philosophers do pursue truth, but I mean, science also pursues truth. While they
Neither of them pursues truth.
pursue absolute truth, they don't claim to ever attain absolute truth.
Neither of those is actually true. Scientists all the time are claiming to know absolute truth. That's why you don't see Michio Kaku in the media anymore, and neither of them is approaching truth. Only the Gnostics were approaching truth. It was only the Philaletheia of 1st century, 3rd century Greek, the Mediterranean Greek lingual tradition, who were approaching truth. It's only the mystical, the experiential religious. It's only the magical demagogue who's approaching or making a claim of truth. What he doesn't understand is that the word science means knowledge.
There's nothing binding? I don't know what you fucking mean by binding.
Well, I'll tell you what he means by binding. Binding is religion, so the binding, and anyway, philosophy is wisdom, and what they're aiming toward isn't in fact truth. They're aiming toward what we can say without being wrong in the future, what we know for certain, and that has nothing to do with truth, because what we know and what is true don't necessarily have to be the same thing. And then what you're binding yourself to is a truth that you have to be faithful to, a truth that you have to defend with your life.
Binding. I'm guessing you mean like the laws of logic bind to this reality so that you can't violate them?
No.
We've just been able to fine-tune our descriptions of what we perceive as logic. We've been able to fine-tune it.
What does he mean as we perceive as logic? What is he talking about? We're able to fine-tune our descriptions of what we perceive as logic. Like, if he's going to ridicule this guy for using perfectly cromulent Gnostic language that he doesn't understand, because even from his own Gnostic worldview and Gnostic standpoint, he has no knowledge of anything, what does he think logic is?
It to the point where we haven't been able to violate them. All the time in science, in philosophy, you have things violate these theories, principles, laws. There are things that we find that violate them, and so then we have to
I would love an example.
Change our descriptions. This has happened.
I would love to know. See, Thomas Hobbes, and the reason I spent so much time telling you and telling myself that I was going to do a breakdown of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, very much the way I'm doing a breakdown of these jokers. Thomas Hobbes says that when you speak, if you don't begin what you're talking about on definitions, you can't come to useful conclusions. So I can't take any meaningful lessons away from this guy, because I don't know what his words mean. At least the other guy, I know what his words mean, because he tells you, in this tradition, this is what this word means. From this tradition, this is what this tells us. This is what this tells us. He's at least pointing to an antiquity that I can inspect for myself. The Godless Engineer is telling me things with no grounding perspective. You would think an engineer would know a little bit more about how the way electricity works.
And all throughout history. I don't know why just now, in 2020 or 2019, I can't remember when you fucking made this. I don't know why you think right now you have the absolute truth of reality when...
Because the absolute truth of reality that he's describing is an absolute truth of reality that we've known since at least Ptolemaic Greece.
Obviously, the people of
Have you never read a book? Not one?
Own religion in the past have not had the absolute truth of reality.
You can't form a religion without a claim to the absolute truth of reality. So pick a religion and you get a claim to truth about absolute reality. That's what religion is. That's what the binding is. That's what he's talking about. That's what you just told him that he couldn't be talking about. What is going on?
You think that you just now have the absolute truth.
Not just now. He's explained to you where he's getting it from. And that look right there, by the way, this is a guy that's talking before he's thought. This is a guy who's talking before he's thought. When his eyes and his body language no longer match up with his tone and the words he's saying, that means he's thinking about something else. He's noticing his cognitive dissonance.
In the past. Evolution's one thing that they've been wrong about. Slavery was another thing they were fucking wrong about. To be fair, everybody...
Who is they, though? because slavery isn't a thing that they were wrong about. From the perspective of any religious person, you have to account for the fact that you, the religious person, can't change the society. So it has to be God-given. It's in the same way that you, as evidently a person who lives in the United States, I see Boston, Massachusetts on one side of the screen, and this guy doesn't sound like he has an accent that's foreign. To me, you as a person in the United States acknowledge, by being from the United States, you have to acknowledge that you believe that certain things are self-evident, because we all agree in the United States that it's self-evident that we were all made equal. So you have to know that there are certain claims to knowledge that are self-evident and that are self-evidently made as self-evident. How are you so bad at this?
Was wrong about fucking slavery. They used their religion in order to enslave other people.
They absolutely did not use their religion to enslave other people. They were enslaving other people, and they used their religion as an argument to keep the state out of making them stop. Those are wildly different things.
Even in the Bible, they've obviously...
Because it was how does he not know that it was the religious right that got slavery out of England and ultimately out of America? It was the Quakers that got slavery gone.
Been wrong in the past. They don't have absolute...
So were the Quakers wrong then?
...truth whatsoever.
Because the Quakers believed it was self-evidently true that we were all made equal and that nobody could own anybody else. What the fuck? Neither one of them just defined logic, and neither one of them said how exactly evolution contradicts logic. This is why I fucking hate this space. Trying to get an education from my peers is impossible because they're all lying or they're all so facile it's meaningless. So I hope you learned something. Evolution does not contradict logic, because what logic is for later. Let me show you what happened when I had my initial meltdown over these idiots. I typed in, what are the laws of logic? And I put quotes, as you'll see on the screen, around laws of logic. And I noticed that I didn't get a Wikipedia. And the first thing I get are laws of thought, traditionally the three fundamental laws of logic. The law of contradiction, the law of excluded middle, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, now wait a minute, I know what that is. And then I see what are the four laws of logic, what are the three basic laws, what are the universal laws, what are the four principles, sounds sort of familiar to me. And then I keep scrolling down and I notice... well, this is Christian magic. Apologetics is Christian magic. James Bishop blog is Christian magic. This guy is talking Greek rules of logic. And then we get into how the philosophy thinks about logic. And so I'm just like, okay, well, what about Wikipedia? What does Wikipedia have to say about the laws of logic? And wait a minute. How's this possible? And so, the rules of logic, people, unless we're talking about the laws of thought, the rules of logic are the rules for building a coherent argument, and what these two gentlemen are arguing is 13th century medieval philosophy, and 13th century medieval philosophy is theology, and neither one of them knows enough about anything to be arguing theology, let alone metaphysics, let alone the structure of a well-composed argument. Neither of them had a well-composed argument. What are we doing? Alright, so anyway, that's all I've got for you. Thanks for checking me out. This has been the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. This is Shaggy Dog Philosophy. And I'm probably going to want to do a lot more of these in the future, so stay tuned.